Advice. Why do we take it? Why do we ignore it? And what are the consequences?
I'm a bit allergic to advice, especially unsolicited advice.
It's actually hurtful, it's disrespectful.
You and Cheryl decided to ignore advice and go back into the bushfire zone.
I have regrets.
Was there much advice available about adolescence?
There you go, there's your bits and see you later.
So it was pretty basic.
Yeah, we didn't even get the banana and the condom trick.
Has any wisdom from Dolly Doctor stuck with you?
I know very well how to insert a tampon now. Don't put that bit to air.
Melissa, any dating advice?
No, don't ask me.
Once I knew I was going to apply for Alone Australia, I started thinking about what advice I would need and sought out people who could help me on my journey. I'm Gina Chick. I'm a rewilding facilitator, which basically means I help people to be at home in the wild. And I spent 67 days alone in the wilderness in Lutruwita for Alone Australia. And spoiler alert, I won. Hello world. Oh, how beautiful. I'm scoping out where the best place for a shelter is going to be. My shelter strategies came from a few different places. I spoke to rewilding and survival experts, actually all over the world, who are friends of mine, getting ideas for a shelter. I loved my home so much. I'm so sad that it's not there anymore. My house is looking like a bit like a house. So the Palawa gave us a comprehensive list of what we were and were not allowed to take from the land. Who can't resist a Flintstones moment? And also what's poisonous on the land. Basically, if it's purple, don't touch it. You know, do not eat the purple berries. It's the middle of the night. During boot camp, there was a lot of advice about how to manage the isolation of being solo in the bush. I knew that Blaze's birthday was going to happen when I was out there. I knew that I would very probably have a big grief storm come through. I guess there is no preparation for that kind of grief. No amount of advice can prepare us for that loss.
Gina, congratulations on your win.
Thank you.
You took a lot of advice going into Alone Australia, but how would you describe your relationship with advice more broadly?
I'm a bit allergic to advice, especially unsolicited advice. However, when there is something that I'm preparing for, something big like Alone, something where I feel like I don't have all of the information that I might need, I will talk to a lot of people and ask for advice. And that's a very different thing when I ask for it.
In 2010, you found out you were pregnant, and 4 days later, you were diagnosed with breast cancer. How did you process those two extremes?
That was a very big week. We'd had a miscarriage about 6 months before, I think, and I was 40, didn't think that I could get pregnant. So to find out that I was pregnant was joy, wasn't it? Like we just, basically were over the moon. And I didn't really have time to enjoy that before the next diagnosis came in of breast cancer. And in the beginning, when I found out about the breast cancer, my first thought was, that's okay, I can just, find a way through. I'll do alternative therapies, I won't have chemotherapy, it's cancer, people survive cancer, I'll get through it somehow.
What did your doctor advise you do?
She said, it's very bad news. You must terminate this pregnancy or you will die.
Wow.
And they were her words, you must terminate or you will die.
What did you think when you heard that?
I think at first I probably just left my body a little bit. But then something rose inside me and it was this fierce, ferocious voice that almost wanted to snarl, no.
No.
No. And it didn't come from my head. It didn't even come from my heart. It came from my belly. It was this, I call it my wolf mama. Just was, I wanted to basically leap across the desk and do not nice things to the doctor. Yeah, it was no.
Lee, you were Gina's partner at the time and the baby's father. What was it like to be advised to terminate the pregnancy?
I mean, I was a young 20-something-year-old at the time. I'd been living in the bush in a teepee for a year. I'd sort of stumbled into Bondi, been brought to Australia by Gina. I was still trying to work out how to be a modern human, and then all of this kind of unfolded, and I was kind of hopelessly unprepared for really, I think, engaging in a useful way. My strategy was basically, in Gina we trust. So I was just happy someone seemed to know what was going on at the time.
Gina, what did you decide to do?
In the beginning, I decided very quickly that I wasn't going to terminate the pregnancy. That was the big no, which meant that I then had to find out what to do. I found a breast surgeon who treated women with breast cancer with chemotherapy, and he said that chemotherapy was an option, which for me was a no in the beginning. I went through alternative therapies. The doctors were telling me I needed chemo. The circulating tumour cell levels were rising despite everything that I was doing, and more I was looking down the barrel of having to say yes to chemotherapy. And as a kind of an alternative hippie, you know, chemo was anathema because chemo is cytotoxic. It kills dividing cells, growing cells, and that's what a fetus is. So for me, it was such a huge thing to come to terms with. This beautiful friend, Malcolm, he said, Gina, there's white person medicine, there is black person medicine, there is yellow medicine, red medicine, earth medicine, woman's medicine. There are so many different types of medicine, and every single one of them has merit, and every single one of them is your advisor, but that's all they are. Ultimately, the choice is yours and the consequences are yours, and you have to live with them, and ultimately the timing of your choice is up to you. And for me, this was this was the nugget, because it meant that I didn't have to make a choice that I then had to back myself into a corner and defend. It got to that point where I just had to face the brutal truth that nothing that I was doing was working, and that to make sure that I didn't leave Lee to bring up our daughter on his own, I need to make the choice to have chemo. And I woke up that morning and it was peaceful. My yes was actually peaceful. It was like I'd tried everything. And now what happened was the time was yes. And so I said yes to chemo.
Lee, how did you feel about Gina's decision?
Being in the clinic when they put the big needle and this bright red toxic chemicals are going in, and I could feel this impulse. I just wanted to in my head I was ripping out the needle and chucking Gina over my shoulder, and we were getting out of there, punching anyone who got in our way. But I had to just breathe with that and suppress that and recognise that actually there was some healing that was going on in that, and it was necessary. Yeah.
Violet, you're a professional tennis player. Whose advice have you relied on in life and on the court?
Probably my family, mostly my dad, mum, my sister who's here with me today. We're a year apart. She's basically my rock. I feel like we're twins. But I always go to her for everything, whether it's about tennis, school, life, relationships. She's my go-to person.
6 years ago, when you were 17 and about to play Junior Wimbledon, you received some news from home. What were you told?
I was qualifying for Wimbledon, and I had just won my last match to make main draw. And I would always call my dad after every match just to tell him how I went and keep him updated. And then that day that I had just made main draw, I was like super excited, wanted to call my dad and tell him the good news that I had just won. But then the coach that was with me at the time kept on delaying it. So I felt like something was wrong at the time. And then maybe a few hours later, he was like, okay, let's go to a quiet place and we'll call your dad. And it just hit me like I knew something wasn't right. And I'd called my dad, and he was obviously with my family, with my other 3 siblings. And that's when I found out that my mum had passed away.
I'm sorry to hear that, Violet.
Thank you.
Patricia, you were at home in Sydney when your mum died after she had a stroke. Did you give Violet any advice at that point?
Yeah, I did. Like, her dreams are to play pro, so I was just telling her, like, just follow it. If Mum were there, she would say the same thing. And, like, everyone around her was just trying to keep her calm and push her through.
Violet, other than your family, did you reach out to anyone else for guidance on whether you should keep playing or not?
So I had obviously my coach from my high school with me as my dad wasn't there, and then I also had my dad's sister who is also a pro tennis player. They were like, we understand if you don't want to continue, like this is obviously something really hard on you, you're so young, it's okay if you want to pull out of the tournament, but I said, I know if Mum was here, she would still want me to play and follow my dreams.
And then tournament directors arranged for you to speak with someone there as well. Who was that?
Martina Navratilova. She's obviously a tennis legend that everyone knows, but I got the chance to meet her because she was told that my mum had passed away, so they wanted to do something nice for me. So I went and had lunch with her. We just sat down, talked about tennis, about life. And she just gave me some advice of just following your dreams, and obviously you're so strong in just staying here and competing while you just found out that your mum had just passed away, so yeah.
Did you take Martina's advice?
I did. I still, to this day, I'm at college right now in America, and obviously I'm 23 now and I've matured over the years, and just the advice that she's given me every time I step onto that court, I'm just following my passion for tennis and just doing what I love the most.
How did you go at Junior Wimbledon that year?
We made quarterfinals of the doubles, so yeah.
Lisa, you grew up in Deniliquin in country New South Wales. What was it like being a teenager in a small town in the 1980s?
Isolating, very isolating. It's a very different way of living when you're not open to any external information of anywhere. You've had the same group of friends for years and nothing else.
As a teenager, was there much advice available about adolescence, about sexuality?
Grade 6, you had the life talk in a room. Your mother sat at the front and we sat up the back, and we had the anatomical conversations. That was it.
That was it?
There you go, there's your bits and see you later.
So it was pretty basic.
Yeah, we didn't even get the banana and the condom trick. We didn't get anything. We were so isolated. It was so embarrassing.
Aside from the sort of anatomical education you got, how did you feel the sex education was in terms of more broadly how it represented society?
Didn't know anything about gay, lesbian, anything. When I moved to Melbourne when I was 19, I landed in Paran in St Kilda, and I had an identity crisis, so I didn't know what the hell went down. I didn't know what a lesbian was. I didn't know what gay was. I didn't have any idea.
So where did you and your school friends go for other information?
Dolly Doctor was it.
Dolly Doctor. Tell us about that.
It. So once a month, Dolly would come out and we would all pounce on it, open it up and read the juicy sections.
What did you learn about in those sections?
Definitely nothing about gay. There was just all the other sorts of things, kissing, cuddling, dating, those very subtle introduction into sex. So.
Lara, you're 46. You also read Dolly Doctor as a teenager. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the southern suburbs of Sydney, as known as the Shire. It was a very Australian suburban upbringing, very heterosexual. As a young woman, it was all about, kissing boys and meeting boys and doing things for boys, and, that seemed to be the grand occupation at that time.
Who did you turn to advice about your health, your body, sex?
Very much my girlfriends. We also had the wonderful giraffe in the dark room, Happy Harold, come and visit us and tell us all sorts of things that was so helpful at the time. But we turned to each other. There was classes in school Definitely, but again, very anatomical, very basic, and never lended towards emotions or feelings. It was all what's going to happen to your body, how things are going to change, how babies are made, but not any of the emotions that you're going to feel as a young person falling in love or feeling attraction or feeling same-sex attraction. Definitely, there was none of that.
Tell me, when a dolly doctor arrived, would you take it to school, and what was the environment like around that magazine?
When Dolly Doctor arrived, it was the holy grail. We would gather. Someone would always get a copy, and we would gather around it, and someone would have it hiding in their bag, and it would get passed around. And, you know, I think we'd all be quite bravado, and we'd giggle and we'd laugh, and we'd go, oh, as if you do that, or who's silly enough to do that. But inside probably going, oh, wow, didn't know that.
Has any wisdom from Dolly Doctor stuck with you?
I was going to say, yes, I know very well how to insert a tampon now. Don't put that bit to air. You know what I think with Dolly Doctor that has stuck? I think Dolly Doctor, even then, even in the 80s and 90s, it gave us the very early inklings of consent and body autonomy. And it was definitely not spoken about the way that it is now. But I think for young women, especially as a young girl growing up in very much that suburban beach culture that I grew up in, it was the very beginnings of you can say no. Your body is your own.
Lisa, what did you like most about reading the Dolly Doctor column?
At that time, I was very, very naive. So it had a gentle introduction into the teenage years.
Did you ever write in for advice?
No way.
Why not?
No. Judgment was a huge thing at that age, and you would just assume that everyone would know it was you.
Yeah, right.
God, no, I would not.
Lara, how about you? Did you ever wonder who the real Dolly Doctor was?
I did, and it is literally this week I learned it was actually a doctor, so that was very exciting. Yes.
Melissa, you're a GP and you were Dolly Doctor for 23 years. How did the advice column work?
So the questions were selected by the staff of the magazine, either an editor or a sub-editor, and I would just answer those questions.
And so whoever wrote the letter to you is waiting to see whether, one, it's picked and two, it's answered.
Well, that's right, and they really received hundreds and hundreds of them. They published 5 a month. Wow. At the time. It increased to 10 for a little while. And there was a 3-month delay from when I would answer the questions to publication, but they might have been mailed in several weeks before that as well.
You've got one of those letters with you. Would you mind reading some of it for us?
I'd love to show people this Winnie the Pooh paper. It says, from Don't Know, Dear Dolly, I always watch the TV and read books with this certain subject in it. I always hear about orgasms and masturbation, but what are they? Sometimes the subject comes up at school also, and I don't know what to say or do. Please help, I need to know, how do I masturbate and how do I have an orgasm? I need to be saved from any more embarrassment.
Do you remember what advice you gave in reply to that?
It would have been along the lines of, I always took this approach of, I'll answer the question or questions, like that's why they've written in, so I'll try and actually answer that part of it. I also looked for emotions as much as you can tell, but she says she's embarrassed, so I would have addressed how embarrassment was common and normal, and it's fine to be curious about sex. I would have used that word, I think, and described what sex is in 150 to 200 words somehow.
What did letters from your teenage readers teach you?
So much. What I realised after getting to know readers' questions was there's this incredible hidden concerns and anxieties that particularly pubertal adolescents are experiencing, and a lot of angst, which I could relate to. I mean, it takes you back. Every time I read these letters, it takes me back to my 13-year-old self as well. I learnt how to understand the person asking the question.
Do you know how many of your readers were boys?
Yes, I was told by the magazine that 20% of Dolly readership were boys.
Michael, you're 60. Were you aware of Dolly Doctor as a young man?
I have to admit, Kimmy, I would sneak in to try and understand what the other side was doing.
Did you learn about what the other side was doing?
No, and I still don't understand.
Who was your main source of advice growing up?
It would be other boys who were just as clueless as me. It was the blind leading the blind.
What about in your family?
My dad is the smartest man in the world, and he never finished grade 6, but I don't remember my dad ever giving me advice. He would ask me questions, and I've found the best advice that I've ever got. It wasn't actually advice, it was when somebody would ask me a question about what I had asked them, and I've tried to stick with that even now with my daughter. I don't give her advice, I ask her questions.
The terrifying reality of an unprecedented inferno.
At Boban, northwest of Taree, a fire, dormant for weeks, exploding through containment lines and was too fast to stop.
Dangerous conditions are forecast to continue to what could be a horror bushfire season.
Those bushfires were in November 2019 near Taree on New South Wales' mid-north coast. Ed, you and your wife Cheryl had been living in that area for 18 months when the fires came. What's your property like?
5 acres surrounded by bush, beautiful on a good day. Except, as we later learned, not the right place to be.
Is it easy to access?
Not really, no. You have one road in and one road out, that's it. And you are bound by the bush.
And how about neighbours?
The closest neighbour is about, as the crow flies, probably 800 metres, but to get to him takes you a bit down a road and a gully and stuff.
Right.
And the other guy is on top of a hill, so it's a bit, while they're close, they're not exactly close.
You're an SBS journalist, but you're here tonight to share your personal story. You've been a foreign correspondent in war zones, but did you have any experience in fighting fires?
Not at all. Not at all. People ask me this question about war zones and how you cover war and how you fight the fires kind of thing. This is a natural event that you have absolutely no control over. You have no idea where it's coming from. You have no idea where it's going. You can hear it in the background, you can smell it, but that's about it, really. You're on your own.
What official advice were you following as the fires approached your place?
The first day we were told we had these apps that give you an idea where the fire is, and so the advice then was get out, which we did. We got out, we spent the night in our car, amongst 40 others from Boban particularly, who lost a lot of homes around there. We sat in the car, watched the flames jump from hill to hill, mountain to mountain, tree to tree, and then the next morning we thought, well, that's it, it's past, we can go back. And I think that's where the whole thing faltered.
Cheryl, when the fires were sort of near you, you got a call from a neighbour. What did they say?
Get out.
They said get out?
Yep. They said the fire's here, almost here. It's across the creek in Boban. Get out. And he gave us an address in Wingham and said, just come here, get out, don't stay. And of course we got out and we left with nothing, nothing at all. And that night we realized we came into the local Marley Hall where everyone else gathered. People from Boban, from our little part of the world, Marley, Morrell Creek. And I didn't realize everything was burning around us and it was still freezing cold. And we didn't have any warm stuff with us and we didn't think.
No water.
There was no water to drink. It was very scary.
Ed, after spending that night in the evacuation centre, what advice did you then receive?
That advice was that it's time to leave, get out, and, that's probably the best advice at that point in time. But for us, on the ground, what we felt was that the front had already passed. So, on the one hand, you're getting this advice from the official sources saying, well, it's still dangerous, there's still fuel on the ground, and people on the ground saying, it's gone past, it's okay. And that's what we followed. We said, OK, fine, it's gone past. It should be safe.
So you ignored the advice from the cities, but took the advice of those on the ground?
Pretty much. We ignored the official advice.
You then went back in, got through the road, you saw your house was still standing. What happened next?
What happened next was a bit of relief, thinking that, OK, we got the house, it's back in, it's in good shape. We probably did something right. We spent that night in our neighbour's property, and that night we literally watched the fire take hold one more time across the ridge.
Wow.
And our neighbour and I, we stood by this thing, and we were watching this fire come through with a garden hose, trying to put this damn thing out. I mean, I don't know what we were thinking, frankly, other than the fact that there was nothing else to do.
You spent the next 3 days staying and defending your property.
Yes.
What was that like?
So you're trying to get rid of fuel as much as possible. You're trying to get rid of... So, again, most people have plastic water tanks, plastic and fire. Brilliant combination. So you start raking as much as possible all the fuel from around that. And the two of us raking a 5-acre property, just trying to get things in motion. Exhausting. The heat, the smoke, you name it. And we had no one. We had no connection, no electricity. There was no telephone lines working. Our kids didn't know what was going on. I think the other thing, too, is that at that point in time, what people forget is that a first world country becomes a developing country. Communications break down. Mobile phone towers break down. All these things that we take for granted disappear. And so you fall back on things that, the old steam radio, that kind of thing. And that's what kept us going. We had, ABC radio in our ears going, this is what's happening in the fire front and so on and so forth. And this sort of connection to the outside world. So, yeah, what was it like? It was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Did your house survive?
It did.
Yes.
It did. To some extent, a testament to our efforts and our friends who turned up 3 days later.
Tim, you study the philosophy of human nature. Is there a particular mindset when we listen to advice or take on advice or seek advice?
The American author Julia Galef talks about the soldier mindset. We stand fast, we defend ourselves, we push back, we fight. We use all these kinds of war metaphors to defend our identity, to defend our beliefs, to defend our chosen course of action. But there is another mindset, and she calls this the explorer mindset, the scout mindset. This is the idea that instead of seeing this person as an opponent, challenging what we believe or what we want to believe, we can see both of us as being on the same side, exploring a territory together. We can stop fighting and start cooperating to try to figure out, to get to the bottom of what's actually out there in the wilderness. It's more automatic for many people to slip into the soldier mindset, but you can train yourself to be better at the scout mindset, to work to try to figure out what's going on so that you can make a better decision.
Historically, how important has the role of advice been to our species?
Advice has been hugely important. Our superpower is not individual intelligence. Our superpower is our ability to communicate, to share information, to teach other people, to build upon group experience so that we aren't all experimenting for ourselves. We can build upon a whole social network of knowledge. So advice is fundamental to what it means to be human and has made us the successful species that we are today.
Gina, you rejected advice to terminate your pregnancy after you'd been diagnosed with breast cancer. How did that go?
I didn't terminate the pregnancy. And I went down a path of listening to my instincts. And when it came time to making the decision to have chemo, I trusted science in a way as well. I asked the oncologist to give me studies from women who'd gone through pregnancy and had chemo.
And when was Blaze born?
Blaze was born full term, completely naturally. She was 4.5 kilos. She was 10 pounds in an hour and a half. And let me tell you, at 41, that was a lot. And she was healthy, and I was in remission.
What happened when Blaze was 3?
So when Blaze was 3, I found a lump in her belly. And we went on a journey of doctors and diagnoses. She had a neuroblastoma. It was removed, and she went home. They said, come back if there's, come back in 3 months for a scan, and 10 weeks later, she died.
You and Lee were there at the time, together?
Yeah, we were. We got to meet her death together. Got to hold her in my arms, and Lee was wrapped around both of us, and we sang. We sang to her as she flew away, and there was no one else in the room. The staff at the hospital were amazing, and it didn't actually take that long because she was so full of tumours that she was ready to go.
I'm so sorry. You canvassed so much advice, Gina. Have you ever second-guessed your decision?
No, I haven't, because for me that is a soul-destroying path. Like, once we make a choice, the consequence is ours. And if we make that choice because of external authority, because we've taken advice from someone else and we haven't run it through ourselves, then the consequence of that is ours. And the path that I went down, it could have gone badly. It could have gone really badly. But it brought Blaze into the world healthy, and for 3 years we had her, and I wouldn't trade 1 second of those 3 years. Now, there's a question, did having chemo trigger the cancer that killed her? But there's no merit for me in asking over and over, going, what if, or if only. To me, that's just a waste of life. I'd rather make my decisions and live with the consequences and learn from them, so that I'm constantly refining that instinctive voice. So when it comes to the crunch and I'm at another crossroads, I can trust that animal in my belly to choose the right path.
Lee, what's your philosophy on taking or leaving advice?
I think that the whole question of advice takes us right to this universal human experience of being in difficult situations and having to work out, how do I move forwards from here? And it's really about someone else saying, you're not alone in this, and actually I don't know either, so let's look at this together in a curious and compassionate way. That scout mindset of accepting, actually, maybe no one really knows, but we can do this together. I think for me that's the beautiful heart of this advice-giving relationship, is when it stops being about, I'll give you a package of pre-digested information that might be trying to push you towards something, and it's actually more like sort of mentoring or counsel or just relationship. It's just saying, hey, let's ask these questions together.
You're also a psychotherapist.
Yeah.
Do people tend to search for advice rather than taking their own?
A lot of my job is about helping people to direct their attention back inwards again and saying, where can we find clarity? I'm hearing there's a part of you that feels this way, I'm hearing a part of you that feels that way. Let's get really clear and compassionate about these. Let's see what happens when we bring them together. Let's see if there is some scope for bringing in some more awareness or some more compassion. Maybe it's just about allowing you to have sort of permission to make this decision that some part of you actually feels like is already the right answer.
Charlotte, you're a home cook and you write cookbooks. Let's see what role advice has played in your life.
If you are at your lowest, cling on to anything that will try to bring you something of joy. And that's cooking for me. And it might not always work out. It's cooking like life. It's imperfect and it's messy, but it's still going to be delicious. Advice is a really funny thing. I think whenever we hear that, we think of other people's advice to us. But I actually think about my own advice to myself. When I got married, my mum just so explicitly said, do not share your money, do not join your bank account. And I just ignored her and I went blindly into it. My husband and I were gifted a copy of The Barefoot Investor by Scott Pape. Barefoot Investor is full of financial advice. My husband took that like a gospel. There was no sort of negotiation with him on deviating from that plan. That book has absolutely changed lives, but it changed mine for the worst. I went to my former best friend and I said to her that I needed help and I needed to know what to do, and she told me that I already knew, and I did, and I knew that I needed to leave. So I left my marriage, and I suppose ultimately when it happened it was swift. So I started seeing my own therapist. I call her the Oracle. The advice that the Oracle gave me was so clear, it was so basic, but I needed that. I needed things to be stripped back. I needed someone to just tell me really clear commands of what I needed to do at that point in time. When I was in rock bottom, I had no desire to cook. The idea of cooking for one just felt like the most desperately lonely thing in the world. But then I remember my mum advising me that I had to sort of take chunks out of this elephant, one bite at a time, and to just cook something just for myself, something that was comforting and nurturing.
Charlotte, why did you ignore your mum's advice to keep those finances separate when you got married?
I think because I was blind in love and I believed in him and I believed in us, and I just went into that wanting him and wanting us, and so that was one of the conditions and I just agreed to it blindly.
How did your differences over finances play out in the relationship?
I'll preface this by saying he is a glorious human being who I do still love and will always love. It was ultimately two people who wanted very different things. How the financial control, I suppose, worked for us is that I had a joint bank account with him that my monthly pay got paid into. His pay also got paid into that, although they were very different amounts. And from that, all of our joint expenses came. So rent, food, phone bills, electricity, internet, those sorts of things. But separate to that, I was paid $100 a week as an allowance, which he also got. But it meant that if I wanted to go out for dinner with my girlfriends, if I wanted to take an Uber home because it was late at night and I'd finished work, if I wanted to buy a bottle of wine, it all had to come from that $100.
Not a lot.
Not a lot.
Was that a source of tension for you both?
We never fought before that, and I really mean that. We had a very peaceful, beautiful relationship, full of love. But then ultimately, what resulted was that we fought all of the time, and we fought a lot about money, which was his way of controlling that, and then inevitably we fought about sex, because that was my way of having some sort of control over myself, was to not have any libido.
Did you seek advice from your mum or your friends at this stage?
Not at all. It was so much shame, so much fear, and just a lot of anxiety.
Did you seek advice as a couple?
Yeah, we ended up, kind of at my insistence, going to a couples counsellor. And she, for a year, worked really hard and really beautifully and diligently with us to try to come to some sort of middle ground. But ultimately, there was no middle ground to be found.
Rashika, you're a clinical psychologist. If couples ask you whether or not they should split, what advice do you give them?
It's really tempting because as a third party, you can often see the dynamics even before they walk into the room. And it's really easy to say, well, you should separate or not be together type of thing. But that's not our role as psychologists. We lead them to their answers, ultimately taking them to their answers and not giving them the answers per se.
I think as a new parent, the level of advice has been like no other. Advice has been coming from all angles, from friends, from families, from mothers group. Advice can be really valuable, especially when it's coming from people that we trust in our lives, especially when we've sought out that advice.
As two non-penis owners, we had a child with a penis and we didn't really quite know what to do with it, to be honest with you. And so we contacted Kat's brother and said, like, what do we do here?
And then also there's all of the advice that's like not requested. So much unsolicited advice. Good night. Maybe the most annoying piece of advice is sleep when the baby sleeps. He sleeps erratically.
I love him.
And it's just not feasible. So even when you seek out advice, you know, sometimes it doesn't sit right. Oh, there you go, darling. I think in seeking advice, sometimes what you really want is just to speak out loud what you're thinking anyway, to see if you can come to your own conclusions. I think the advice that keeps coming up for us is the cherish the moment advice, which is really valuable, and I think it will be something that I end up saying when he's a bit older. But it's really difficult to take that on board. I think when you're in the moment, when he's vomited all down your top, when he's done an explosive poo at 4 a.m, that advice is so good, but so hard to take on board.
Michael, you have a 10-year-old daughter. Charlie. What's it like being a solo dad?
The unsolicited advice, Kumi, comes thick and fast, but it comes from a place of you're a bloke, you obviously don't know what you're doing, and while they may think that it's being helpful, it's a little bit hurtful. It's disrespectful, in my opinion, and some of it is so patronising. I went off and had lessons because I was conspicuously and consciously incompetent at hair. Believe it or not, man buns weren't a thing when I was a youngster. So Charlie had seen a girl at kindy with hair that was all braided, and she said, "Dad, that looks nice." So I went off and had lessons to learn how to do it because I didn't want her to be let down. And we were at a 5-year-old birthday party, and Charlie decided she wanted to do her own hair. And I couldn't believe the amount of pressure I felt with walking out the door with it. It was a great attempt for a 5-year-old, and she was proud. But at that party, I went off to the toilet, and when I came back, there was a kind lady trying to be helpful had actually redone her hair.
Wow.
And came back and said, "There, I've fixed it for you." And Charlie was quiet in it, and I couldn't believe how much it affected me, because not only that, in the car on the way home, Charlie had said that the lady had said, "Daddies are just useless at this sort of stuff."
Really? What's some of the unsolicited advice that's been offered to you?
The most common one that would come would be, make sure you wipe a butt in the right direction. It's I'm not that silly to think that, but they come in the form of you must, you have to, you need to. The noise of all the unsolicited parenting advice tends to drown out that instinct, that quiet voice inside you, and it makes you doubt yourself. Am I doing it wrong? And you start to second guess it.
Lara, how would you compare your 12-year-old's knowledge to your own at the same age?
Vastly, vastly different. That child is a wealth of knowledge. The things that come out of her mouth just amaze me, and I feel like I'm a really well prepared parent. I'm a widowed solo mama, but I devote a lot of energy to parenting really well. I've got 2 girls, and it just amazes me. She researches, she's got access to the internet, she has access to social media within reason. She knows about gender diversity, she knows about identity, she knows about all the labels. She recently won herself a Lego kit at a festival because she knew every single gender and sexuality diverse flag that existed. She's just so aware, and we're very lucky. We live in Sydney, we live in the inner west, we live in a place where that is available to her to learn. But I think I also am concerned that there's risks with that. There's so much for her to learn. And where that advice is coming from is not as ethically bound, morally have the moral compass that maybe it once did. And while we may giggle about Dolly Doctor and what a kick we got out of that as girls, at least there was someone with a moral compass at the helm of that. And I think where the advice is coming from now, from so many different places, I don't know where that advice is coming from. So I'm more correcting than I am. I thought I'd be wonderful and open and tell her, and she could always ask me all these questions, and now it's more that I need to correct the information that she is getting out there.
Melissa, your Dolly Doctor days are behind you, but if you were writing as Dolly Doctor today, is there anything you would answer differently?
Yes and no. Obviously, there is a lot of information out there, and I think I would be acknowledging that and asking them the questions. What do you think? Where are you learning this information? Where is this question coming from? Because it, in fact, could be coming from anywhere, not just the playground or amongst their peers. And I think I used to always try to do this, but I would even more reinforce that trust of gut instinct, knowing that you're an autonomous body and soul and mind, and somehow putting that into a couple of 100 words, trying to explain that.
Lara, you were a regular reader of Dolly Doctor as a teenager. Mm-hmm. Is there anything you would like to ask Dr. Melissa now? Here's your chance.
I have so many questions. Can you do a column for dating over 40? That'd be really nice.
Melissa, any dating advice?
No, don't ask me.
Lisa, you're in your late 40s now. Is there anything you would like to ask Melissa, Dr. Melissa?
Gravity, why? And menopause, why? Why didn't we get taught any of this?
Oh, and you're not the first person who's said that to me, in fact. And I think, like women's bodies, particularly around menstruation and hormones, we've been in the dark for so long. We're only just acknowledging the huge, profound ramifications of what our bodies do to us. And I see menopause as like a form of going through puberty again. It's profound and affects everyone differently, and for some it's not that big a deal, and for others it has profound effects. So I do think we need a menopause dolly doctor.
Violet, do you still reflect on that advice Martina Navratilova gave to you 6 years ago?
I do, definitely. I feel like in that moment when I had just lost my mum, I feel like I didn't really think about that advice at that time because obviously it was so hard, and I feel like I had just lost faith and love and confidence for tennis. But I felt like as the years went on and I grew older, more mature and stronger and gained that confidence back, I definitely look back to what she said to me, and every day when I go out on court to train or play tournaments, I'll always look back at the conversation I had with her and always remember what she said to me, to always keep fighting and believing and keep doing what you love.
Mm. Ed, you and Cheryl decided to ignore advice and go back into the bushfire zone to defend your home. Was it worth the risk?
No.
No.
At the end of the day, it's a possession. That's it. It's a home. That's it. It's not life. It doesn't end there. And things could have gone completely pear-shaped. It didn't. So I'm here to talk about it. But I would not do it again. No way.
So you have regrets?
I have regrets, yes.
How's it been on your emotional health?
For me, not so much, but for Cheryl, she still has, I would say, PTSD. She still can't smell smoke. She can't sleep sometimes. And that's hard. In hindsight, willfully ignoring something that experts have spent some time working on, people far cleverer than you, with far more resources than you, have come up with something and told you, don't do that. And you still do it. You're stupid. And I have no qualms about saying that, because here we are. We can actually talk about it now. And just as well, we probably would not have been here too.
What would your advice be for someone in the path of a bushfire?
Get the hell out, if you can.
Yeah.
If you can't, that's another matter. But if you can, get out, get out.
Lee, you and Gina run rewilding workshops. How's your relationship these days?
Well, it's great. I have a wonderful, beautiful wife who I love and adore, so it's important to say that Gina's my second best friend. But we work really well together, and I think we sort of have a shared value in this rewilding piece, which for us, the rewilding is actually all about this internal authority. Is that the difference between a domesticated animal and a wild animal is the wild animal gets to march to the beat of its own drum. And I think this kind of shared value is really what helps us to work together and be a good team still.
And Gina's the godmother to your daughters?
She is.
One of them.
Yeah. I mean, I think both. But
Well, I think both. We haven't talked about it yet.
Both.
It's both, Gina. It's both. How's that for you, Gina?
Oh, I love being part of Lee's family, and we have taken a life where our own relationship got changed so much by the death of our daughter. And instead of it splitting us into, the other side of the planet, we have managed to find a friendship that is probably stronger as a result. And I adore Lee's wife, Hannah, and I feel very blessed to be able to do that.
Thank you.
What can others learn from you?
For me, there's this internal guidance system that all humans, all living things are born with. We've gotten so used to hearing the sound of our own voice that we've forgotten how to listen to that voice, sort of bringing it back to what's the silence between the notes. And that's, for me, where the deep instinctive voice comes up. And because I live by that voice, any choice that I make in my own timing and my own rightness.
What did your daughter Blaze teach you about life?
Blaze taught me about joy. When she first was born, she was 4.5 kilos and fat like a baby seal. She had like rolls of fat and she came out with her eyes open. And I remember looking at her and thinking that she is still looking at the mystery and her eyes never lost it. You know, there's these some kids and they're looking into and through the skin of things. Blaze could see through the skin of things and she could find the deeper mystery and magic in everything that she did. And I think that I still walk around with my little girl by my side, looking through her eyes at the world and looking at the world with that joy and that curiosity and that sense of mystery and magic. And it means that every step is a beautiful one.
Gina, thank you so much. Thank you to you all for being here. You can catch up on this episode or any others on SBS On Demand. I'll see you next time.